This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio. KGAB AM 650 and the Town Square Network serving the Intermountain West, and Easy 101 serving Colorado Springs, southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, and from what I've seen on my truck radio, kind of reaches pretty far north into Denver too. And then 780 AM Denver. Have a great show for you today. The first half is going to be an interview with James Hirsen. He is one of the top gurus on the mindset in Hollywood. You know, he's written a #1 best-selling book, Tales from the West Coast. He's been on The O'Reilly Factor, Fox and Friends, Your World with Neil Cavuto, Glenn Beck's show, CNN Hardball with Chris Matthews on MSNBC. That must have been fun. And he has interviewed Mel Gibson, Gary Sinise, John Voight, Bill O'Reilly, Dennis Miller, Gene Kirkpatrick, Peggy Noonan, etc., etc., etc. He's also a frequent guest on big radio shows across the country. Laura Ingraham, Michael Savage, Sean Hannity, Al Rantel, Dennis Prager, Janet Parshall, Michael Reagan, and others. And it is great to have him on the show. And the second half is going to be a little bit of summation of what we talked about. I'm going to tie it into how the mainstream media and Hollywood, directed by the White House, you'll see how that goes in the interview here, because it's all a symbiotic relationship between that triangle. How that was handled in this, government shutdown and debt thing. We're going to talk a little bit about some facts which have come out about the shutdown and the memorials and the National Park Service behavior. Then I'm going to give you some facts that are just coming out on ObamaCare, the ObamaCare computer system, some real-life stories about what's happening with the increase in premiums, the increase in deductibles, how that fits into your total family financial situation, particularly you ladies. I mean, the guys care about their kids too, but, moms have a special bond with kids. I've seen it with my own kids. And we're going to talk about that because it's pretty damn important. And then I'm going to reveal to you that the debt ceiling was not raised. No kidding. It really wasn't. This is all nonsense that they're feeding you. Wait till you hear this. Your eyes will bug out. And then I'm going to tell you what that means to you. This perfect storm of decreasing income, a triumvirate of Hollywood, media, mainstream media, the Obama administration pulling your strings and feeding you false information. I'm going to give you many examples here at the end of the show. And what that means to you in terms of the debt, ObamaCare, increasing expenses, decreasing family income, decreasing family net worth, what it means to you, your family, and ladies, your kids. And it's going to make you think. At least I hope it does, because, boy, I'll tell you what, we're reaching the point of no return. Anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome James Hirsen to the show. James, how are you?
Great to be with you, Reid. How are you?
Doing great. Doing terrific. Let me ask a question. Let's start right off the bat. So where is the Hollywood crowd and why on the current shenanigans, the mess in Washington over the debt ceiling and the government shutdown?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to define the Hollywood crowd. For me, Hollywood is generic. It's really all of the entertainment media that includes television, movies, music, now, digital entertainment. It's all based in Hollywood. And the stars tend to be uninformed people with inflated egos who have a case of narcissism. They're surrounded by enablers who sing the praises of anything that comes out of their mouth. And that includes the entertainment press. So that somewhat explains why they come out with the kinds of things they do and why they're kind of lemmings, if you will. Because Hollywood, the entertainment business is a glamour business. And it's very difficult to break into, and it's very difficult to sustain a career. And so anxiety is common for people in the business, no matter what role they play. Even executives have a lot of anxiety, and part of it is because it's so volatile. And because of that, social calendars and social relationships are critical. And Hollywood has evolved into a place where the trend always goes left of center. And so there would be a lot of people showing up for a rally saving the whales, but very few people showing up for a rally saving the Second Amendment. And that's just the nature of the town. So right now, the talk in Hollywood, both in private and in public, is dealing with ObamaCare, so-called ObamaCare, the very misnamed Affordable Care Act, and the shutdown that resulted from Congress trying to get ObamaCare delayed or modified. And so what we see is that same sort of lemming mentality, and the White House has recruited people in the celebrity world, just like they went after athletes, but it was successful in the celebrity world, to go out and, number one, to do what they always do, and that is to demonize Republicans and help characterize the shutdown as a Republican-caused activity. And the other is to assist with a very difficult sales job of 18 to 35-year-old young Americans to get them to sign up with these insurance exchanges and pay higher than normal price for a product that they don't want and probably don't need. So the other problem, of course, is, traditionally, when we use the term propaganda, we're talking about communication in a totalitarian regime by a dictator or someone like a dictator that manipulates people without resorting to factual and logical kinds of arguments. Well, that's necessary here because a 2,600-plus page piece of legislation was sold to legislators and Americans alike as being a law that would insure people with pre-existing conditions. That's turned out not to be true. Would allow people to keep their own doctors. That's turned out not to be true. Would lower costs. The opposite has turned out. It's raising costs. And this goes on and on. So therefore, the Hollywood crowd is perfect because they can distract, they can use emotion, they can use narrative, and they don't have to worry about facts. And of course, the mainstream news media forms another prong, and there's an assault, a propaganda assault on that George Orwell would be fascinated with.
Yeah, George Orwell would no doubt add several chapters to his book, 1984. What exactly is, because, you've been in the middle of this, the symbiotic, I would say the darkly symbiotic relationship between the White House, mainstream media, and Hollywood? I mean, who kind of presses the buttons to get the parrots' mouths speaking?
Well, there's been a long relationship with the Democrat Party and Hollywood going back to really Franklin Roosevelt, stronger than again with John Kennedy. John Kennedy hung out with the Rat Pack. It was even stronger under Clinton. Still, Clinton has a very strong relationship with a lot of the fundraisers in Hollywood and the allies in Hollywood. And with Barack Obama, the historical significance of the first African-American president is something that is, right out of a Hollywood script, the way Barack Obama's first campaign took place. And so, of course, he and his wife are darlings of Hollywood. And so they've, for example, in the last campaign, the largest single fundraising event in the history of America was conducted in Hollywood, primarily because of the fact that George Clooney was the named person that was attending the event. It was a dinner with George Clooney. He raised $15 million in one evening. And so fundraising is one of the examples of that, as you describe it, a symbiotic relationship. The other is, in the last campaign, we saw celebrities going into swing states and making appearances. John Bon Jovi, Bruce Springsteen, and the like went into Ohio, and they can't help but make a difference. One of the things that drives me crazy, because I live out here and I deal with celebrity power is when people, they'll say to me, well, what does it matter what these people do or what they say? And my simple answer is, when Oprah Winfrey points her finger at a book and says it's good, it becomes a bestseller. When a celebrity that has no relationship with any expertise endorses a product, it becomes successful. Celebrity endorsements are a multi-billion-dollar business. There wouldn't be such a business if they didn't have this power, and they have it in politics. And unfortunately, for the Republicans and for people on the right, the vast majority of the young and hip and happening and even older celebrities and power brokers in Hollywood are all left of center, and they do everything they can to assist the Democrats. And they would do so without a quid pro quo, but there are plenty of perks that Hollywood gets. You notice the chief lobbyist of Hollywood is a former Democrat, Chris Dodd, a former senator, who claims he's not a lobbyist, but he works at lobbying full-time.
Yeah, he also claimed that he didn't take special deals from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae during that fiasco, too, in 07 and 08.
Well, he was rewarded for that and given this really choice Tony gig where he gets millions of dollars a year, basically, to tell his buddies in Washington to help Hollywood out with anti-piracy activities, which Obama's been complying with, copyright legislation, and tax incentives and things like that. And the other thing about Hollywood, of course, that's very important is it's a concentric circle and sets of concentric circles, and the people who are successful are very wealthy, and they have homes abroad, they have armed bodyguards, they are not going to need ObamaCare, they will opt out of ObamaCare, and so for them, it's a different perspective. It's kind of like Matt Damon. I'll give you an example. Matt Damon, who was probably the chief spokesperson for public education of any celebrity in the United States because his mother was a public school teacher, and every time public education was being discussed, funding, whatever it was, there was Matt Damon. He'd pop up like a jack-in-the-box and talk about public education. At the time, he was living in Massachusetts, and I don't think his kids were old enough or whatever, but when he moved to L.A. recently, this year, some reporters looked into and asked him about his kids' education, and it was discovered that he's sending his kids to private school. And they asked him, they said, Matt, how can you do this? After all, he said, I had no choice. This was the only way they could get a, quote, progressive education, close quote. Now, this is in Los Angeles. That's in a state where they mandated that people who feel like they're the opposite sex when they're in junior high or have to be given access to the other sex's bathroom. You can't get more progressive pretty much than Los Angeles. Maybe San Francisco's a little more progressive, but Matt Damon, to not use a euphemism and use plain language, is lying because the public education system is a cesspool, and he wants his kids to get educated. And in certain communities, depending on where he lives in L.A., going to private school is the only way for a child to get an education. And what parents do, they either homeschool, they go to, if they can afford it, they send their kids to private school or parochial school, or they do what's called a shadow school, which copies the Eastern model. And when I say East, I'm talking about like Japan and Korea. And the kids go to the cesspool during the day, and they go through a intensive tutorial program in the evening. They end up going to school for 16 hours a day, but they survive, and they get a chance to get a good education and go to college. So that's just one example. So Hollywood, the H in Hollywood also stands for hypocrisy.
Absolutely, and you know that blends well with this administration. I mean, it sounds to me very similar to Obamacare is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but let's exempt the White House and the White House staff.
That's exactly right.
Because it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Just substitute Obamacare for public school.
We exempt the White House staff, Congress, the congressional staff. The unions tried to get exemptions. So far, they haven't. But lots of Obama's buddies got exempt.
Although the unions did get a deferment. They did get a deferment to 2018 up front for their support of the law when it first passed.
And all of which, including the deferment or delay of the employer mandate, all of that was done illegally because the president has no such power. He altered legislation, and George Clooney recently, I hate to pick on him again, but he was out promoting this movie Gravity, and he said, echoing Democrat talking points, he says, you can't negotiate a law, meaning the shutdown where Obama refuses to negotiate. It is fine that he refuses to negotiate because you can't negotiate a law. Obamacare is a law. When in fact, it's just perfectly fine with Clooney that Obama changes it with a stroke of the pen without negotiation. And saying that you can't negotiate a law, which is a White House spin mantra, is absurd because segregation was a law. Didn't we negotiate it? We negotiate all the time. And
there's some precedence for Obamacare actually being no longer a law because of changes that were made without congressional approval.
Certainly they opened the door. You have to say that if you're going to change legislation illicitly outside of Congress, which, by the way, anyone pulls out their Constitution, the very first section of the Constitution says, all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in the Congress. That's real simple language. Anyone can understand. That means the president cannot change legislation, but he did.
Listen, Obama on his NBC interview, when questioned about that rather softly, I might add, said, hey, I didn't want to go back to Congress because those Republicans, they were going to negotiate. That is the Constitution, Mr. President. Yeah. How did Hollywood get left? Now here are people who are successful. Obviously, they have some talent. Whether it's important in the general scope of the world is another question. But they have some talent for what they do. Some of them, at least, are hard workers. Some of them are complete screw-ups. But why would people like that go left?
Well,
that's one of the things I don't get.
Well, traditionally, the artistic communities going back, especially in Western civilization in Europe and in the United States, have always been left. Why that has to do with maybe the mentality of art, cafe societies, that sort of thing. The reason I think Hollywood is a little bit more vitriolically left is twofold. One is the history of Hollywood was a studio system, a top-down system, controlled by very few companies. It was broken up by antitrust law, and all of a sudden it was thrown into a little bit of chaos, and actors who used to be under contract and controlled became little CEOs and developed a lot more power. And the other thing that happened in Hollywood is the demonization that Norman Lear really was the forerunner of this with his organization, People for the American Way. He scared everybody in Hollywood who are generally very enamored with the pursuit of pleasure, that the Christian right are going to come and legislate away your fun. And therefore, kind of like a reverse Paul Revere. Instead of the British are coming, the Christians are coming. And so that really affected, the left, which was already kind of present in Hollywood, and the young people who, as our culture corrodes, and we see it in the case. Miley Cyrus is a perfect example.
Yeah, she really is.
Miley Cyrus and Christianity just don't mesh. She's is essentially what she does has been described by a lot of people on the internet as just acting like a real second-rate, trashy porn star. And yet, there's not a reaction. I mean, even the last Saturday Night Live, which, by the way, was highly politicized, slamming the Republicans, had a sort of they meant it to be a satire, but what it was a disaster, a fake music video that took a sitting Congresswoman, Michelle Bachmann, played by Miley Cyrus, while she was touching her intimate parts of her body, sort of simulating self-pleasuring. So this is supposed to be Michelle Bachmann. They actually had a chyron, so in case you didn't know it was Michelle Bachmann, to let you know. And the Speaker of the House of the United States of America depicted as a party animal, bisexual, thong-wearing, another porn, cheap, second-rate porn star. No reaction from anybody in terms of the tastelessness, the decorum. Had they done that with Nancy Pelosi, or had they done that with Harry Reid, or with the President, the First Lady, there would be cries of outrage. They would want to boycott NBC, and that's the double standard we're dealing with. But this is part of the propaganda campaign, because the Obama administration sees correctly that the media is seamless. And when I say it's seamless, when you're trying to influence people, the news media, the social media, the entertainment media, they're all part of the same seamless entity. And if you have all of them going, there's a chance that you're going to be able to get what you want. That's what they did in the last campaign. It worked.
So, but, Hollywood, and by Hollywood, we'll take your large vision of them. Basically, the message that is to be spewed comes from on high in the White House, goes out to Hollywood, and at the same time, another prong goes to the mainstream media, who then elicits Hollywood, either commercially or on shows like Saturday Night Live, to spread that particular message. And then they rebroadcast it through the social media and the other mediums. I mean, is that kind of a thumbnail?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always work that way in that order. I'll give you an example. The White House came up with a program. They had a hashtag. When I say a hashtag, it's a # plus a set of words that's used on Facebook and Twitter and the like. Their hashtag was Get Covered. And they got Amy Poehler, Jennifer Hudson, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Olivia Wilde, I can go on and on. Just Katy Perry and Lady Gaga have more followers than anybody else on Twitter. So they all started tweeting Get Covered messages for the Obama administration, who's trying to sell this to the young people. And a young celebrity that's on Vampire Diaries communicated with young men in a typical propaganda way, in a sexual way, went topless and had this card covering up the strategic parts of her body that said "Get covered" or "You'll be naked." Very clever, but that came from the White House, hit the social media. Then, when her name is Nina Dobrev, when she did this topless thing, it started being covered by the entertainment news media and even some local news media outlets. So it sometimes goes different directions, but the point is they're playing hard on all media fronts, and they have allies on all media fronts. When I say they, I'm talking about the left of center crowd. And the right of center, Republican Party and the Republican organizations are kind of playing catch-up, and that's what happened in the presidential campaign. That's what's happening now.
Just out of curiosity, what can the Republicans, or should I say the folks that are to the right, conservative independents, Republicans, libertarians, conservatives, what can they do to combat this?
Well, one thing they can do is to get active in the social media themselves. It's a place where anybody can communicate with a lot of people. I'm an ordinary mortal. I'm not a celebrity. I have almost 350,000 followers. I do what I can, on the social media front. That's one thing. The other thing is just what we always preach, at this time, we have to contact our representatives and let them know if we are emotional about certain issues. And those, I know people now who are of all points on the political spectrum that really want Obamacare either destroyed or delayed because they're suffering for it, because they found out that pre-existing conditions are not covered, that they can't get coverage, that there's technological problems, that it's a kind of, the mechanism is flawed, all these other things.
Well, actually, although it flew under the radar, there was an edict that came out from HHS, Kathleen herself, that basically shut down any sign-ups for pre-existing conditions after February of this year.
Well, that's the kind of stuff, and we have to get that out, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because, it's built on lies, and the lies have to be exposed and communicated, and so this is the beautiful thing. We have alternative media. We do have right-of-center shows and media. They're slowly disappearing, but we have some left. And the other thing is when you say the Republicans, right now the Republicans are doing exactly the right thing in the sense that they're hanging tough in the face of this onslaught propaganda campaign. I got to give them credit. They're hanging tough. They got to stay tough because it's only going to get worse. And it appears that unless the Republican leadership hangs tough and the base communicates strongly with representatives and in every way they can, the Obama administration smells blood and thinks they can have a victory here. And somehow they have to be convinced that that's not true. It reminds me of the last campaign. If you actually look at the numbers, the real issue, and a lot of people look at the last election and they talk about, the Republicans didn't reach out. And there were some dumb candidates that made stupid statements to the press, et cetera. But had the people that were voting against Obamacare come out and voted in record numbers, like a lot of people thought would happen, if they not, there were less people voting for Romney in total. The quantity was less than that which voted for McCain. That's ridiculous. So if you have those people that sat out active in voting, that would have made the difference. And it makes the difference on telephoning, and it makes the difference in emailing and sending faxes and all of these things. So it really comes down to each individual participating.
The other thing I find fascinating with Hollywood, it's not just this blatant in-your-face Twitter, Facebook, Saturday Night Live stuff, but they very cleverly and they very subtly twist this left-wing message, this anti-American value message, anti-conservative message, into everything they do. Their documentaries, their films. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's in everything. If you think of the power, if you think of this seamless media I'm describing, and just the entertainment component consists of movies, television, music. And I say music, now we have video, music videos with combination of lyrics and images. And what is being communicated? It's anti-family, it's anti-traditional values, and it is literally everywhere you look. It's on broadcast TV, cable TV, it's in reality shows, it's in the plots of movies, the choice of movies. It never ends. And just one example of it is the way characters are depicted in television and film who are traditionally right-of-center characters, people who are religious, white guys from the South, people who are business people. They're a cartoon version of the most negative stereotype imaginable constantly appears on TV and film.
James, it was a pleasure having you on. I think it's been kind of an eye-opener. People know this, but to have it kind of put in the vernacular by somebody who follows it, I think has been hugely helpful. And we'll reconvene maybe early next year, and we'll see how all the current confetti falls on the street and what the media, what Hollywood is saying about it then.
So
thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
That was a great interview, folks, and I'm going to tie it into you with what's happening right now, because this is all part of the same picture. This is not some isolated, fun thing. Hollywood is wacko. This is a concerted effort. You ever read George Orwell, 1984, The Thought Police? You remember Winston? Read that book if you haven't. Boy, it's a little scary considered in these times. And you know, one of the things that you can do to protect yourself is land or good real estate with acreage. And something you ought to think about. And you know, if you don't buy my book, there's going to be a little commercial on it here. It's been a #1 bestseller numerous times. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you name it. And named Best Real Estate Book of the Year by USA News. It was named Best Business Investing Book of the Year by USA Book Review. And you know, I'm kind of proud of those awards. And whether you read my book or another good real estate book, and I don't mean buying rental property, I mean buying a place away from what could be strife that you can exist on that will also serve as a hedge against inflation, which we're going to be talking about. Buy one and read it. You really should, whether it's mine or somebody else's. This is one of the great stores of wealth that's left. There's a reason that Ted Turner and all these guys, the largest landowners in the United States, are continuing to buy land at an accelerated pace. There's a reason foreigners are buying land at an accelerated pace. Land is forever. We'll be right back.
Land. For love and money, the beauty of the land provokes something primal. It fills us with awe and makes us yearn for land of our own. My land, those words evoke a sense of security and a place in the world. Yet the word land also evokes nitty-gritty financial issues, business, improvement, taxes, profit. In Volume 1 of Land for Love and Money, rancher Reid Rosenthal uses his award-winning style to tell us real stories, the hard-hitting truth your banker forgot to tell you about all types, sizes, and locations of land. For those drawn to land purchase, ownership, management, preservation, and sale in good times and in bad. Reid's intense love of the land, his devotion to wild and remote places, and his extensive experience with land purchase and sale throughout 2 continents make him uniquely qualified to write Land for Love and Money. A bestseller already, Land for Love and Money is available at landforloveandmoney.com, Barnes & Noble, Hastings, Amazon, and fine bookstores everywhere.
Okay, we're back. Let me kind of tie this whole show in for you. You know, there was a study that was done, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of things here, and I'm going to move quickly. There's going to be all these articles and others and some graphs and charts that you really, please read them. Even if you read one a day. You don't have to sit down and read them all at one time, although you might be fascinated that you may wind up doing that. Moms, you owe it to your kids to read these articles. They're from numerous sources, from across the spectrum. They will be posted on the website, on therightsideradio.com, along with the show. You can give it to your neighbors, whatever. Read the articles. So there was a study, okay, and it was done by the Media Review. I mean, this is what they do. They kind of study things. So do you know that in the 2 weeks leading up to the shutdown and then in the 2 weeks thereafter, Hollywood and the mainstream media, which I'll talk about primarily here, prompted by the Obama administration, literally with faxed talking points or phone calls from administration officials telling them what to say, this is how slanted the coverage was. MRC analysts, I'm reading some of this, reviewed each broadcast network evening newscast from the first day of the shutdown, October 1, through when the deal was announced, October 15th. Of the 124 full stories and brief items of the shutdown, debt ceiling, etc., 41 blamed Republicans or conservatives, 17 blamed both sides, none blamed the Democrats. That's an acceleration of the same trend MRC documented during the 2 weeks prior to the actual start of the shutdown, when those same broadcasts ran 21 stories blaming Republicans, 4 blaming both sides, none blaming Democrats. Here's some quotes. NBC anchor Brian Williams on October 14th. The current showdown and this current government shutdown traces its history back to a determined core of GOP House members who are vehemently against Obamacare and were willing to shut the government down because of it. ABC's Diane Sawyer. She explained Fitch's warning of a possible downgrade of U.S. credit. Quote, a major agency now threatening a downgrade, lowering America's sterling financial status in the world. Right. And all because hardline members of Congress have brought the U.S. to the brink. Okay. In those same 15 days, the networks ran sound bites from 23 federal workers, all of them furloughed, 47 individuals whose lives have been hurt by the shutdown, and 56 ordinary citizens condemning the shutdown. All the negative opinion was directed at Washington in general, but 17 singled out Republicans, only 3 castigated Democrats, a ratio of nearly 6-1. Now, you know from your neighbors. I mean, some of them disagree with you. I don't know what side you're on, but you're going to find people on both sides of the fence. And I know, because I know people of both ilks, it wasn't 6-1 in either direction. So what we see here is kind of what I talked about with James, because you also had interviews, Chair. Robert Redford gave this bone-chilling interview about, basically, it's the Republican skanks in Congress that are all responsible for this. Look, everybody knows what the deal is, right? The Republicans sent 4 bills up there that funded the entire government except for Obamacare. Actually, that was the first bill. The second one funded Obamacare but asked for a delay in the individual mandate, which, as you'll hear here in about 10 minutes, is going to have to happen. Obama is going to have to backtrack on this whole nonsense. I mean, he has no choice. And then the third one went up there without the delay, but can you just change the law so that Congress is under the same law as the American people and doesn't get special benefits? Listen. The decision to shut down the government was a Democratic decision. And then afterwards, it was a Democratic decision not to fund certain aspects of the government, including the national parks and the war memorials, which you've heard about. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. However, there were hearings this last week after the shutdown ended. And it's kind of interesting. Representative Trey Gowdy he's a Republican from South Carolina. He's terrific, by the way, and very sharp attorney. He grilled Jarvis, the head of the National Park Service. And by the way, I'm going to do a whole show on the National Park Service because they really have turned into the Gestapo. I mean, they spent hundreds of thousands of our tax money doing videos that praise Muslims and praise Islam. Say what? This is a National Park Service? What's their stick in this? It's very weird, very weird. Anyway, he pounded on Jarvis. He wanted to know, the Anti-Deficiency Act is what shut down the government, by the way. That's 17% of the government that was shut down. The other 83% of the government functions. So he grilled Jarvis on what provision of the Anti-Deficiency Act, the ADA, allowed him or mandated that he shut down the Lincoln Memorial, which has never been shut down in the other 27 shutdowns. The memorials never shut down in the other 27 shutdowns, and portions of the parks, which have been partially shut down in other shutdowns, however, have not been completely shut down. And you know what? Jarvis couldn't answer it because there is no provision that mandates it. None. It's kind of like the poor vets coming home and their folks weren't given the money to pick up the bodies, isn't it? Yeah. Nothing in writing, just, who knows who told me how to do it or told me what to do. Let's talk about Obamacare. This is an interesting stat for you. So, Obamacare, the actual law, the actual statute that was passed, we have to pass to see what's in it. Thanks, Nancy. 381,517 words. That's about 2 of my novels. A little bit more, 2.5 of my novels. Just think about how big that is. You folks who have read Maps of Fate, the second book in the Bestselling Threads West series, That's 452 pages. It's 130 some odd thousand words. This law is 381,000 words. Think about that. That'll put it in context for you. But this will really put it in context for you, because the law is not really what gets enforced. What gets enforced are the regulations behind the law. And do you know who drafts those? Bureaucrats. And you know who they work for? The executive branch of the government. And you know who the head of that is? Barack Obama. That's how this country is set up. And do you know how many words are in the ObamaCare regulations that have been promulgated thus far, and they're years from being done? 11,588,500 words. My entire Threads West series, over 8 years, and it's a huge project, one that I love, but a huge project, will be about 3.4 million words, folks. 33 books. 33 books. Think about 33 books, 3 inches or whatever they are thick, stacked on top of one another with real thin paper. And that is what has been promulgated so far. Just look at your bookshelf. That'll give you an idea. Nobody could read it. In fact, on the ObamaCare website, this is an interesting little stat. One of the conservative sites, admittedly conservative, the ObamaCare site invites you to download all the regs if you want and print them. They tried to do it. They burned out 2 drums in a brand new top-of-the-line printer and went through like 142 inkjet cartridges and weren't even halfway through. They give you an idea how much crap is in there? I mean, you'd never know, right? And the IRS is going to enforce it, and none of us are going to run afoul of any one of those regulations in those 11,588,000 words, which will be about triple when they're done. You betcha. You betcha. Look, this kind of flows into the computer deal. We all know that there's been huge problems with the rollout and the computer systems and the exchanges and people trying to get on and trying to register and supposedly trying to buy insurance. Now, there's been a whole bunch of investigations on how many people have bought insurance. The best I can find is a sum total of 27,000 people have enrolled, actually bought insurance on the exchanges in all 50 states over the last 2 weeks. 27,000. Remember, the law is $1.3 trillion underwater right now. The CBO projects $265 billion per year annual expenses starting in 2023. It's their 2012 report. You can look it up. Times 10 is $2.7 trillion, folks. There's only $1.3 trillion in funding, $715 billion for Medicare, $675 billion in new taxes, 2/3 of which we're paying, contrary to the president's promise that there would be no new taxes on people under $200,000. That leaves a shortfall of $1.3 trillion. This computer system was budgeted at $93.7 million. It's right in the bill. It's so far cost $634 million. It is not working. As you are about to find out, because it is described as one of the easiest major computer systems in the world to hack. How do you like that for your personal information? It's far more than a glitch. There's IT specialists now that have gone in and kind of hacked into the system without damaging it. I mean, just to read the script and stuff. I want to read you a report from one of them. It'll stand your hair on end. But this will stand your hair on end. I mean, we have a president. This is his signature legislation. This is the crown jewel of socialism. He's so worried about the middle class and jobs. You know who he hired to do it? CGI. You know where they're from? Canada, not America. By the way, CGI was canned by the Canadian government when it had to start over on its healthcare system, which CGI started to design. But we still hired them? Kind of, I'd really like to know the background on that, wouldn't you? A little crony capitalism, maybe? A little funneling of money to a CGI associate in the United States for campaign contribution? Who knows? Okay, Mike Adams. He's like this computer techno whiz kid, whatever. He's a natural news editor. I mean, he's very well known. Now, I'm going to read you some things out of the report, which he just issued. In fact, it was on the 17th of October. Okay? I mean, just a day or two ago. It's really the first one of its ilk out, although you'll notice on my next little part of this that even some of the mainstream media that ought to be and has been friendly to Obama is starting to catch on to the fact that this isn't just a lot of traffic. There's something really, really, really fundamentally flawed in the whole deal. I'm going to read, this is right out of his deal. The real story on the catastrophic IT disaster known as healthcare.gov is only now beginning to be recognized by the nation. As a person with a strong IT background running large R&D projects, I was among the very first to claim that healthcare.gov is not just broken, it's DOA because of critical design failures. I have personally looked at the JavaScript code running part of the healthcare.gov website. If you're curious how I got the code, I simply typed the URL of the JavaScript code into the browser address field. The browser then pulls up the entire code block because JavaScript is client-side code, not server-side. Folks, I'm not a techno whiz. You know, I got 5 commands: on, off, attach, delete, and send. So hopefully some of you know what he's talking about, but I think we get the gist here. What I am seeing in this code is nothing short of jaw-dropping, as people are now saying this code is crazy. You can't even call it JavaScript code. If you sat down 100 monkeys in front of 100 typewriters and told them to start banging away, I'm confident at least one of them could come up with something far better than the healthcare government JavaScript code. After spending $600 million on this project, inside the code, the JavaScript programmer comments are just off the charts hilarious. Comments found in the code include, yes, these are actual text comments from the script. Add functionality to show alert text after too many tries at login. Next comment. Make sure we don't try to do this before the SAMI has been posted. Next comment. This file was generated once, can be modified by hand. And I can go on here, but let me give you some other highlights from his report. We got to move right along here. Oh, you're going to love this. This is, once again, I'm reading from his report. Although this healthcare.gov computer code fails to function, it does, however, support the language known as, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Gujarati. According to an online encyclopedia, Gujarati is an Indo-Aryan language native to Gujarat, Darman, Diu, Dadra, and Nagar Haveli in India. It is part of the greater Indo-European language family. Gujarati is derived from the Old Gujarati, 1100 to 1500 AD, which is the ancestor language of the modern Gujarati and Rajasthani languages, and is the chief language of the state of Gujarat. Then he makes an editorial comment. I am absolutely thrilled to know that my tax dollars may someday pay for the health insurance coverage of an ancestor of the Gujarati and Rajasthani languages from the state of Gujarat. So while our greatest generation World War II veterans are being barricaded out of national monuments, the Obama administration is spending money and prioritizing providing subsidized health insurance coverage to descendants of the state of Gujarat. All right, I think you guys kind of get the idea here. This is way more than a big wreck. I'm going to read you one more part. Truly disastrous architecture calls over 1,000 resources just to load one page. For example, the JavaScript file loader for each user transfers all error messages, form field messages, and front-end error messages from the server to the user's browser repeatedly for each cultural language supported by the system. In other words, the entire set of error messages is hard-coded into the JavaScript for English, then again for German, then again for French, Spanish, and so on, all the way through Gujarati, and who knows how many other unheard-of languages. When HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius says this code is functioning, she's actually painting a giant dunce sign on her forehead. The code is so far from functioning that all the government programmers in the world couldn't make it work smoothly by January 1. How does that sound, folks? I guess it's just not a lot of traffic and popularity which has brought it down, as we've been told, huh? By the mainstream media, and by Hollywood, and by the Obama administration. There's that triumvirate again. And listen, there's some mainstream media starting to catch on. This is from the Chicago Tribune, okay? And the Chicago Tribune is a huge Obama supporter. This is his hometown. Here's what they have to say. Wait, it gets worse. Those who have managed to browse the marketplace, they were talking about how the computer system is terrible, have often been hit by sticker shock. Take Adam Welzius, a nurse practitioner and single father from Carpentersville. He sought the same level of coverage on the exchange as he and his 7-year-old daughter have now, with the same insurer and the same network of doctors and hospitals. At best, Welzius found, his monthly premium of $233 would more than double. If he chose a plan priced at the same level, the annual deductible would be $12,700, more than 3 times his current $3,500 deductible. Quote, I believe everybody should be able to have health insurance, but at the same time, I'm being penalized. And for what? Wellesley has told the Tribune's Peter Frost. Quote, for someone who's always had insurance, who's always taken care of myself, now I have to change my plan, end quote. Remember that promise, folks? You can keep your doc, you can keep your plan. This is an editorial, actually. Illinois officials boasted that the insurance premiums here would be lower than expected, but the Tribune reported Sunday that 21 of the 22 lowest-priced plans offered for Cook County residents have whopping annual deductibles of more than $4,000 for an individual and $8,000 for family. That's much more than many families can afford. Upon investigation by the Tribune and the New York Times, we have found that the Obama administration delayed issuing major rule changes to set up the exchanges until after 2012 presidential election, and refused to push back the October 1 launch date lest Republicans take political advantage. You can also read that similar story in the New York Times, folks. That won't be posted on the site. This story will. Sloppy design, we just talked about this. Sloppy design of the architecture of the computer system, not simply an overload of users, created the problems that are blocking people from applying online for coverage. There's also a similar story for those of you who want to check it out in the Wall Street Journal. We encourage a one-year, this is the Chicago Tribune, folks, so don't think the Republicans are crazy, no matter what the mainstream media, Hollywood, and the Obama administration say. This is Chicago Tribune. We encourage a one-year delay in the law. ObamaCare is here. It's time, though, for the Obama administration to level with Americans about what's happening here. It's time to stop blaming Republicans, start talking about what needs to change. The administration can do one thing apparently on its own to spare many Americans. It can delay the requirement that everyone buy insurance by March 31 or pay a penalty. That is the one-year waiver for the individual mandate, folks, that everybody's been screaming about. A delay in the individual mandate would not be a special favor for American consumers. It's a matter of fairness. A one-year hiatus would give everyone a chance to take a hard look at the pricing of these plans to see if consumers could get more affordable options without sacrificing coverage and, of course, to get the computer systems working. There are more problems. People who have individual insurance coverage are finding that Obama's oft-repeated promise, this is right out of the editorial, folks, quote, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan, unquote, is just not true. They're being told by insurers that their existing plans expire on December 31, they must choose new coverage. They are learning that insurers manage to offer low-cost plans by narrowing the networks of hospitals and doctors that are available, in other words, you lose your doctor, or upping out-of-pocket expenses, or your premium goes up, or both. The deeper problems of cost and coverage in Obamacare are going to require an admission by the administration. This government management of the healthcare market is extraordinarily complicated and will be very costly for many people. The law has to change. Now, that's one of the biggest supporters of Obama in the United States, Chicago Tribune. Now, let's add some icing to the cake here, shall we? You think the debt ceiling was raised? And this all has to do with Obamacare. I told you how underwater this deal is, and this is the tip of the iceberg. If they're 7x over budget on the computer system, where do you think they're going to be on the overall plan, this $2.7 trillion mess? Look, the Washington Post, once again, this is not, this isn't some right-wing deal. Ezra Klein, the way it works, he's talking about the debts, what really happened here. The way it works is that the president gets the power to raise the debt ceiling, and then Congress gets an opportunity to take a vote of disapproval. If that vote passes Congress, then the president can veto the disapproval rule. If Congress can muster the 2/3 majority to overturn the veto, then the president's debt ceiling increase is rejected. In other words, the debt ceiling vote goes from a vote where a majority of Congress needs to vote in favor of it to a vote where up to 2/3 of Congress can vote against it. It's called the McConnell mechanism. Our friend McConnell, who brought it into existence in 2011. Obama wants the mechanism made permanent. I bet he does. In other words, once again, I'm quoting Klein here. In other words, there is no limit to how much debt the government can accumulate between now and February 7th, and the lawmakers have gotten away with allowing the country to take on debt and avoid the threat of default without ever being responsible for voting for a debt limit increase. That's what's really happened up there, folks. Not what the Obama administration, some of the Republicans, the mainstream media, and Hollywood has told us. We're like a rudderless ship. There is no debt limit right now. Zero. Nada. None. All right, listen, there's going to be an article posted where we're running out of time. It's unbelievable. I could go on. Each one of these could be a show, and some of them need to be. Porter Stansberry is a brilliant guy, a real savvy investor, representative, and advisor with hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of clients all around the planet. I read a lot of his related stuff, and I'm going to read you something. Federal Reserve Chairman's choices, Bernanke, have allowed the world's wealthiest capitalists to borrow unprecedented amounts of money and buy world-class assets. Meanwhile, the people whom Ben fleeced, the workers, the savers, the few Americans left with simple industry and thrift, the kind of folks who would never have believed the government would actively try to hurt them, have been wiped out. They've seen the real value of their wages, savings, and standard of living decline by huge amounts. If you doubt me, consider the following graphics. And he has a bunch of graphs. Please read this article. You must. Okay? It's clear, and he talks about incomes going down and net worths going down, but the price of things going up and you don't even know it, right? Because they're hiding it from you. He gives some examples. Ford F-150 trucks in the last 5 years are up 27% in cost. Gold is up 128% in cost. Corn is up 109%. This is doubling, folks. 109% of cost. U.S. government debt is up 104%, folks. Forget what Obama talks about. He's done the least in 40 years. I mean, unbelievable. Silver is up 126%. Soybeans are up 125%. McDonald's, Big Macs, are up 42%. And the Federal Reserve balance sheet, because we're buying our own debt, and we're printing all this money, which is what's causing all this inflation, to fund all these entitlement projects and keep the economy rolling. And it's going to get like triple the bad here with ObamaCare is what I'm trying to bring you to. The Federal Reserve balance sheet is up 345%. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Actually, I'm going to insert one more thing here. I think we got a minute left. The value, the real value, and he values everything in gold because it's a real store of value, not just dollars. The U.S. dollar is negative 12% in the last 5 years. The S&P is negative 42% in the last 5 years. Citigroup, he picks one company. By the way, Chairman Bernanke was also the chairman of Citicorp. There's a correlation here. Citigroup, Citibank, is down 89%. 89% in value in 5 years based upon a standard measurement of gold. Not the hanky-panky with fiat currency. So the same thing is true for your investments, which is why I really recommend land. Anyway, the bottom line here is, folks, There's another article here. These are all going to be on the website, please, on the rightsideradio.com. Read these articles. Read one a night. Read two a night. I mean, please read them. I'm going to ask you gals a question. How would you have felt if your parents gave you an envelope when you were born, assuming you knew what an envelope was, but you couldn't open it till you were 18, and you opened it and it said, "Congratulations, you owe $123,000 for your share of the primary national debt of $17 trillion and $1.5 million for your portion of the $110 trillion unfunded liabilities," which the politicians don't like to talk about. How would you feel? Think about your kids. If we don't get this under control, we'll be long gone when the real effects of this really hit, or we'll be in old age for you youngsters, in your 20s and 30s who are listening to the old rancher rant. Think about your kids. These are real numbers. It's just math. And what I've told you about no limit on the debt ceiling, this hanky-panky they've played, this disaster in Obamacare, and you start adding all this up, remember, there's only one source of money for the government, folks. It's your pocket. It's your pocket. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side. Think about what kind of envelope you want to give your kids.